Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very excited to bring you a review for the brand new Transformers Studio Series, Core Class Shockwave. That's right, I said Studio Series and Core Class in the same sentence. Because for anyone that doesn't know, starting in this year, 2022, the Studio Series figures are starting to carry a Core Class assortment, much like your mainline War for Seibertron and Legacy. And just like your more standard Generations lines, these Core Class toys are comprised of both miniature versions of normal size characters and then normal size versions of small characters, such as Spite Witwicky, who's coming in the second wave of these. So this Shockwave is specifically the movie character as he appears in the intro to Transformers Bumblebee. So that very, G1 inspired take on the live action character. Again, the continuity between Bumblebee and the other Bayformers movies is kind of up for debate. Personally, I see it as a different continuity because there's just a lot of big differences between them that don't really reconcile. Plus, the aesthetic's very different. But you can or cannot see this as possibly an extension of the Dark of the Moon character. So, if you've seen my reviews, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Shockwave's packaging. Then we'll open it up, we'll see the instructions, and then we'll see Shockwave himself in both vehicle and robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Shockwave comes in this new style of Core Class packaging that's coming around in both Studio Series and Legacy, rather than the old blister card style that the Kingdom Core Class toys came packaged in, which they were the last holdouts of blister cards. You notice that in your Generations? Everything had been transitioning to boxes. Core Class was that last class that still had the blister card, and now even that's gone. Instead, we get a more eco-friendly, windowless, box-style packaging with a little tab here to hang it from a peg. So, far more sophisticated and premium looking than what we had before, and, less messy to open. So you can see this nice bit of CGI render artwork of Shockwave right up here on the flap, which I guess this is where all the artwork will be for the Core Class guys. You get the branding, Studio Series, your Bumblebee logo. You get the character's name right here. Then you can see Shockwave himself. He does actually come with a backdrop. Despite being really tiny, these guys do get their own little mini backdrops, which is really cool. Really ups the ante on the packaging there. He does not seem to have a number in the Studio Series line. And I wonder if that means that they're dropping numbers altogether for Studio Series, or maybe just the Core Class won't have them. I guess time will tell there. Maybe, once they reach 85, they'll just stop there, because after that is the entire 86 subline. We'll see. So on the back, you can see renders of Shockwave in his vehicle and robot modes. He takes 13 steps to transform, which is not bad for a small Core Class character. And I gotta say, at first glance, he looks very good for his size. He looks like something that could easily be, upscaled into a Deluxe or Voyager, especially, with more part counts and stuff. So it looks really good so far. I'm pretty excited for this. Now, I'm a little on the fence, right? I never was crazy about buying the same character in multiple size classes. Now, we don't know for a fact that there is a Voyager or Leader Shockwave coming, though I would say it's a pretty good bet. But usually, when I buy a character, I like to stick to that one main iteration of them at whatever size they're supposed to be. I have been faltering in that, I guess, conviction here recently, especially with Kingdom. But Kingdom, I also had the false impression that the Core Class figures were going to interact with the Ark, which didn't really seem to happen. But from what I've seen with these new Studio Series Core Classes, they look really good. And for a roughly $10 toy or so, I don't feel too bad picking them up. They don't feel cheap like the old Legends class toys did. So, at least for now, I'm all in on these guys. We'll see if I change my mind, down the road or something. Okay, here are the instructions for Shockwave. You can see here's our front panel with his name, movie logo, Transformers, the render, all that fun stuff. See, no number. So, it looks like they really are just dropping the numbers. Right here, this just shows you how to place his cannon on one of his hands, or I guess really showing you how to take it off. Because interestingly, this Shockwave does have 2 complete hands, and then you can place his cannon on either arm there. So I like that. I like when you have options. And then we just go straight to the transformation from robot to his Cybertronian tank mode. How to place the cannon on top, all that fun stuff. And then this shows you how to put it back on his hand. Now, interestingly, well, no, I guess it is coming off that hand too, isn't it? You know what? The render is backwards here. That's what it is. So this render is just flipped around. Because on this Shockwave, his cannon is actually on his left arm. So, a little different there compared to some of the Shockwaves out there. And there you go. And while we're at it, I just want to show this. This is what I thought was a backdrop, but as you can see, it's actually just a little cardboard insert, complete with little holes for the ties, and a big hole right here for his back kibble to stick through. So, sadly, no proper backdrops. Now, you could still, if you really want to, I mean, it'll stand up well enough, and you could use this as like a little mini backdrop if you'd like. Obviously, there's going to be holes in it, so it doesn't really look that great. But unfortunately, yeah, they're not getting like proper little stands or anything. This is the closest you get. Okay, now here we have Shockwave in his alt mode, and it should look very familiar to some people. I won't really give it away just yet. But you can see he's got his feet kind of here in the front with the treads underneath. He's got his arms forming the other treads. And unfortunately, due to his small size, he does have a lot of robot kibble showing through. You can see his fists right here, just hanging off the back. And his head is right there. He's got some really bad visible head syndrome. The whole thing's on display. And you can see, though, that his cannon, or, turret, is just plugged right into the back of his head, which means it doesn't do anything to hide that face of his. That's a shame. It definitely hurts the look of the toy a lot, even more so than the fists, because it's just hanging out there. But at least it's in the back, I guess. I don't know. You can see everything tabs together pretty well. The arms, they do tend to move around a lot when you're playing with this, so you gotta kind of make sure they stay lined up. And the cannon, because it's on the head, can swivel a full 360 if you want it to. And because it's on this little peg, it can lift up about this high, and it'll stop right about here, and you can push it down a little bit more, but you're kind of pushing it, like pushing this peg against some plastic, so it may put some stress on there. It's up to you. I'm probably just going to leave it in about this position, because it's forward enough and looks like it could be reasonably aiming at something just, ahead and a little bit higher. Overall, though, looks pretty good for a very small little figure. I very much like this alt mode. Now here he is with the other live-action Shockwave. This is the Dark of the Moon Leader class, which you can see is obviously much larger than this guy, but it does give you a pretty good idea of what a potential Voyager or Leader class size version of this Bumblebee Shockwave may look like. Now, you may be thinking, this guy must be, the inspiration behind this guy's alt mode design. And there are some similarities, especially with the feet, coming off the front here. But I don't think that's the case. They do have some similarities, but they also have a lot of differences in their design and aesthetic, too. And who I think the real inspiration for this guy actually is this toy right here. This is Transformers Prime Beast Hunter Shockwave. So not even the same character. I mean, first of all, it's debatable if, the Bayverse and Bumblebee verse characters are the same, but you know what I mean. Very different continuity. But you can see he looks a lot more like this toy. They also have the feet, coming off the front here. But then you can also see he's got a top back-mounted cannon, just like this. They have the Shockwave chest down in the front here, forming kind of like a little cockpit. And then they also have these, kind of small, widely separated back treads coming off the back. Also, very bad visible head syndrome. So I believe, unless it's pure coincidence, that this figure and this character right here are the real inspiration behind the alt mode that they gave this version of Shockwave. Because in the movie, he never transforms, right? With many, really most of the figures that are coming from that intro scene from Bumblebee, they have to make up alt modes because they never transformed in the movie. In fact, their CGI models just weren't made to transform. Most of them were just recycled parts from already existing characters. Shockwave, for instance, when you really look at him, he shares a lot of assets with the Bumblebee Optimus Prime. So a little bit of, movie trivia there. But I really do believe that when they had to come up with something, they were looking at this. Because, I mean, the resemblance is very, very strong between these two. And I have a hard time believing it's pure coincidence. There's got to be at least some talk that happened that caused this guy to look so much like this guy. All right, it's time to transform Shockwave. So the first thing you want to do is remove his cannon from the back of his head. And it's a pretty tight fit, so I would very carefully, as to avoid damaging that little handle, just wriggle it off. Just rotate it back and forth while giving a little pull until it eventually comes out of the back. There's that hole. And this handle, you're going to push it all the way in. And it's going to fight you because it's got this like little friction tab here. But you do have to push it all the way in like that. Set this thing aside. You can go ahead and spin his head around now if you want to. I'm going to untab his arms from his thighs if they haven't already come untabbed from me messing with them. Rotate this back. Keep the arm just kind of up and out of the way. You're going to untab his legs from the chest area. Untab the chest area and abdominal area from the bottom here. See a little tab right there. Lift it up. Get his legs straightened out. Fix the feet. You gotta make sure that this chest area pushes all the way in. And you'll have a little bit of a gap here, just kind of built into the toy. You just want to see this just kind of press flush up against the pelvic region. All right, now this part's a little weird. You have to rotate this forearm piece without rotating the elbow to get something like that. So you want to hold the elbow joint in place to get the forearm to rotate, and then bend it. And here is what he looks like without his cannon. It looks pretty cool. Definitely looks like some version of a G1 base Shockwave. And then you can take the cannon and place it on either arm, but canonically it's going to go on his left. You just use the 5mm port, slides over his hand. Not very well, like the hand's still very obvious there, but you know, from the front it at least looks like, you know, he's got that cannon arm thing going on. All right, and there it is. Check that out. Very, very nice looking, you know, what I would call legend scale or, you know, core class Shockwave. Hits all the major beats. He looks like a very interesting blend of a live action and, you know, G1 aesthetic. And yeah, I mean, kind of just what you would expect from something at this scale. Obviously, not the most posable thing in the world, and most of the posing he gets is on ball joints because they don't tend to do universals this small, so ball jointed shoulders. Though they're pretty tight, so as long as you don't play with them too much, the shoulder should stay tight. He's got an elbow bend. He's got a bicep swivel up here, which is nice, and technically like a forearm swivel that only goes this way, so I guess you could have him like raising his fist like this in anger or something. No waist articulation, which is a shame. Ball jointed hips, which are a little loose on my copy. Like, they don't flop too much, but there's not a lot of force needed to move them. It's got single bend knees and then ankle rock. No tilting, though, sadly. And no real thigh swivel, though. You know, moves a little bit on the ball joint. So, you know, he's about what you'd expect. Oh, of course, ball jointed head, too. Or, really? Is it a ball joint? No, actually, take that back. It's a mushroom peg, so it only spins around, no up and down motion. So, not the most posable. Does look good, though. And I like him. I think he's, I guess I'll call it satisfactory for, you know, what you're getting here and what you're paying for him. Here he is with the Shockwave that may or may not be the same character. And aside from the obvious height difference, I mean, this guy is like more than twice this guy's height, there is a massive aesthetic difference between the two. To where really the only thing tipping you off that they're the same character is, you know, your iconic cycloptic face that Shockwave has, and then maybe the cannon arm. Though the cannon is actually on the other arm with the Dark of the Moon Shockwave. So, again, it's up to your personal headcanon, really, whether or not these are the same guy. I mean, personality-wise, they seem to be quite different. The Dark of the Moon Shockwave is depicted as being much more monstrous, not just in appearance, but in personality. You know, only spoke in, like, this guttural alien speak, and didn't really do anything to show that he was, you know, particularly smart compared to the other Decepticons. This Shockwave, however, from what, you know, little we see of him in the Bumblebee movie, does seem to have a leadership role. He speaks with a voice that is not unlike his G1 counterpart, which is, you know, made to sound very intelligent. Fun fact, for anyone that didn't know, John Bailey actually does Shockwave's voice in the Bumblebee movie. Like, you know, the Honest Trailers guy. He also did Soundwave's voice in that same intro to the movie. Though he's probably more famous for voicing Optimus Prime, both in parodies as well as the Combiner Wars cartoon from Machinima, though, that's best left forgotten. Not that his performance was bad. I mean, I think he does a great Peter Cullen. It's just, like, pretty much everything else about that series was bad. Now, while this Shockwave's alt mode was almost definitely inspired by the Transformers Prime character, his robot mode is very heavily based off the original Generation 1 design, which we can see here in the form of Siege Shockwave. This new version's a bit more stylized. He trades out the very clean aesthetic for having a lot of kibble in the form of like treads and stuff, and his cannon is made to be much larger and a bit more intimidating looking. Now this toy also lacks the cool little like power hose that typically runs to Shockwave's cannon, but that's not because of any change to the character's design, that's just because of the fact that this is a small toy. In the movie, Bumblebee movie Shockwave does actually have some version of his power cord, or whatever you want to call it, that runs, from his back to his cannon. So they just left that out in this release, which, not surprising. Plus, it would have to be very small, and because these are almost always made of rubber, it would end up being very prone to breakage. In fact, I already have worries about the hoses on this guy, and the Dark of the Moon one, and the Prime one especially. The Prime one's little tread-looking hose is already showing stress marks, like especially places where it bends. And that's without me playing with it. That's just from being in a static position. The rubber seems to already be deteriorating there, so I would worry if they put this little almost thread-thin hose running, across this guy. Now, if they do end up making a larger Voyager Leader class version of this design, I'll be more than happy for them to include that, because, with a bigger, more fleshed-out toy, they will have the ability to put that in there and make it look good. And probably make it at least somewhat long-lasting. I guess no less than, what we got with these other guys. And now for our final comparison, I want to do something a little closer to this guy's size. So this is the Legends class Shockwave from all the way back in Combiner Wars. And this Shockwave is interesting because he has an alt mode which is based on the original design. It comes in the form of some kind of a laser cannon or, pistol or something. But then he has a much more stylized robot mode. I mean, they both look the part. You can look at either one of these and say, yeah, that's Shockwave. But they just handle it in very, very different ways. And I think this guy's biggest deviation from the classic design is the colors, especially like the use of this very bright pink hues as opposed to more of a pale translucent color, if that's what they were going for. But he's a decent enough toy, and I really wanted to put these two together to, kind of talk about the difference between Legends class and Core class, and also the pricing. We do know that we just had a price increase. Core class is going to, I believe, 13 in some places. So it's getting up there, right? I mean, it wasn't very long ago that was the price for a deluxe. So not super crazy about the price hike, but I will say when you compare it to this guy, who was a Legends class, he was sold at $10. So already by Prime Wars, they were selling Legends toys by themselves without any extra, partners or anything like that, flat $10. So $3 difference between these two. And you have to question, are they equivalent? Is one better than the other? And while this guy is, he makes for a nice little Shockwave, he's definitely not nearly as intricate as this new one. The part count on this guy is definitely higher, the articulation's a bit better, and the transformation is, a fair bit more complex. So I think it's safe to say that this toy, just based on engineering cost, plastic usage, and all that, is definitely more of a product than, the old one. So if you thought $10 was fair for this guy, $13 really isn't that crazy for him. And he does seem to be one of the more complex core class figures out there. When you look at the stuff they did for Kingdom, they're pretty good, most of them, except Hot Rod. But he does seem to be just a little bit of a step above those guys. So maybe, in a way, is a 30% or 33% price hike justified by the difference? I'd say it's close. I'd say really it's close enough to be completely up to you personally. I mean, it's always up to you, obviously. If you want to spend $100 on it, you're going to spend $100 on it. But, as far as what I consider fair dealings, I think it's there. It's at that point where I could see it turning someone away, but I could also see a lot of people saying, yeah, you know what? I'm fine with this. So I suppose what I'm saying is that his price hike isn't nearly as egregious as some of the other ones I've seen. And this completes our look at the new Core Class Shockwave from Studio Series. overall, I really like this toy. It, achieves what it aims to do, just a small-scale representation of the Bumblebee movie character, and it looks really good in both modes. Again, I really like that his alt mode is pretty reminiscent of the Beast Hunters version of Shockwave, as opposed to the kind of cobbled mess that is the Dark of the Moon version of the character. And then I think the robot mode comes out looking pretty good too. It looks pretty solidly like the CGI model in the movie, despite, unlike some of the other toys coming out this wave, not being to scale like it should be, right? You got big characters like Soundwave, you got your more deluxe size guys coming out in the form of the Autobots. This guy has to basically do what they do, but much smaller, and I think he accomplishes that very well. The only thing he really loses, again, is that little power cable thing running, to his cannon, which, again, how you're going to do that, I don't know, right? It would be so thin and fragile, I just don't see it being a good idea. Now, will we get a Voyager or Leader out of this? Maybe. I think they did respond to somebody asking about it, saying that it was possible. I think it'd be weird for them not to do that, because they're releasing, from what we've seen and rumors we've heard, virtually all the characters from that intro. Like all the Seekers that get released. I think there's going to be like a Thundercracker and Skywarp 2-pack or something. You should see the vast majority of those characters that you saw in that little intro scene represented in plastic. So it would be weird for Shockwave to be kind of the odd one out and not get like a full-size update, or I guess representation, not really an update. So I expect it, and it'll probably have, a little more detail, more complex transformation. But for what this guy is, he's really good. And if they're going to do more of those characters at the size, he makes good case for, them being able to do a pretty good job at that. Now, will they? I don't know. I mean, things are very hit or miss in the Transformers brand, right? Some toys are breathtaking, and they're just so good you can't believe it. And then other toys, you just look at them like, that's garbage bin stuff right there. Like, I don't want that. So, yeah, we'll see. But he makes a strong case for it. Personally, I'm not real big on collecting like tiny versions of characters that have a full-size version, but the completionist in me is kind of winning out here lately, especially since the Core class became a thing. Because I do think Core, despite being similar size and everything, and originally the same price as Legends class, is just a little bit better. It's a little more sophisticated. Now, maybe that's because engineering's just gotten better, but, I like the toys for the most part, except Hot Rod. Freaking Hot Rod. I still don't have that guy yet. I haven't tracked him down. I don't know if I want to. There's that completionist in me, and then my desire to not have a terrible toy are really competing there. But this is not a terrible toy. This guy, really fantastic. The price hike isn't fun, but if you would buy him for 10 and you have the money, you're not hurting, I think you won't be too upset buying him for 13. He is a really, really nice little Core class toy. Of course, that is just my take on this new Shockwave. Now I want to know what you all think of him. Do you want to pick this guy up? And if you have picked him up already, do you like him? Or are you not interested? Either just because you don't want a Core class one, you don't like the design, maybe too many Shockwaves. Some people like one toy per character. Any and all feedback's always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Studio Series Core Class Bumblebee movie Shockwave. And with all that said, I will see you next time.